Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to Women, Climate, and Sports. I'm Amma Francis. I'm a climate law fellow at the Sabin Center for Climate Change Law at Columbia Law School. Thank you for being here today. As some of you may know, climate change is a gender issue. To put it simply, climate change affects women, men, boys, girls, and non-binary people in different ways. In general, those who identify as women and girls are more likely to experience the adverse effects of climate change than men and boys, because women constitute the majority of the world's poor and are often directly dependent on threatened natural resources as their primary source of food and income. To give some examples, many smallholder farmers are women whose livelihoods and food sources are at risk due to climate change. In times of drought, water scarcity increases burdens on women who are often primarily responsible for collecting water. When people are forced to migrate because of climate change, women and girls in particular face increased risks of sexual violence and assault. Lesbian, gay, transgender, bisexual, and intersex persons displaced by climate change also face elevated risks of violence. In post-disaster contexts, humanitarian and disaster aid programs are often targeted at presumed male head of households. In some, intersectional forms of discrimination increase the vulnerability of women and girls to climate change, and at the same time, excluding women and girls from climate action inhibits our effectiveness in managing the climate crisis. One study showed that women are both more concerned and more knowledgeable about climate change. When women are included in decisions related to resource use and societal investment, they often make decisions based on the best interests of children, family, and community. This means that women's views and approaches can inform more holistic and effective climate action. To state it simply, women must be part of the climate solution if it's going to be effective. I'll give you some examples. Studies have shown correlations between women in positions of political authority and lower national carbon footprints, between parliaments with a greater proportion of female members and ratification of environmental treaties, and between higher percentages of women on corporate boards and disclosure of carbon emissions information. If female farmers had the same access to productive resources as men, they could increase yields on their farms by 20 to 30%, 100 to 150 million fewer people would go hungry, and carbon dioxide emissions could be reduced by 2.1 gigatons by 2050. As we saw this weekend with the global climate strikes, the face of the climate movement is a teenage girl. This week, 16 children sued 5 countries, alleging that their rights under the United Nations Convention on the Rights of the Child had been violated by countries' insufficient cuts to greenhouse gases and failure to encourage the world's biggest emitters to curb carbon pollution. Most of the petitioners, which included Greta Thunberg, were girls. So what does this all mean? Scientists report that we have 11 years to cut emissions nearly in half in order to avoid catastrophic effects to ecosystems and the most vulnerable communities. People who identify as women and girls have been leading the climate movement, and they must continue to do so if we're going to solve this climate challenge. So I'd like to affirm all of the women and girls that are leading the climate movement and say, I see you, good job, and we're gonna solve this crisis. I'd now like to welcome my co-moderator, Alan Hershkowitz, Chairman and Founding Director of Sports and Sustainability International, to the stage to talk more about women's leadership in sports. Thank you.
Thanks, Emma. Hello, everybody. It's an honor to be with you all, and Emma, especially, thank you. I'm such an admirer of your work. Thanks so much for being here. In 2007, after a number of months of lobbying by my colleagues at NRDC and I, we got Sports Illustrated to do this cover. It took a long time to get him to do it, but finally I was able to sit down with Terry O'Donnell, the editor-in-chief, in his office, and actually the reporters and the editors were not keen on it, but we were saying, you know, we are working with Major League Baseball, working with the NBA, working with National Hockey League, working with the U.S. Tennis Association, working with Billie Jean King. They still weren't going for it, so I reminded them that every year Sports Illustrated, for whatever reason, has a swimsuit issue that puts a woman barely out of her teens on the cover who's 97% naked, and I wasn't going to tell them how to manage their business, but all I wanted was one cover that dealt with the future of the planet. And there was chuckles and laughter in the room, but then Terry O'Donnell called me in and said, we're going to do it, and we got this cover. So that cover was 2007, and when this cover was produced, 2007 was the first year that the Northwest Passage became navigable without an icebreaker. Today, you can book a recreational cruise through the Northwest Passage. Indeed, we all came together this week, today, here, now, at a time, as we all know, this is an educated audience, a time of unprecedented ecological challenges, something I'm sure you all know about. We burn 80% more coal today than we did in 2000, despite the fact that the cost of solar has declined 80% in the same period. Coal plants built since the Paris Agreement in 2015 have doubled the equivalent amount of coal energy output of Russia and Japan combined. And despite what we know about the urgent need to end fossil fuel combustion, there's 260 more coal plants under development right now. The pre-industrial level of atmospheric CO2 was 280 parts per million. Again, as most of you know, we're now at 415 parts per million, and the last time that was the case, 3 million years ago, seas were about 80 feet higher, and we are well on our way to blow past 500 parts per million. And the last time that happened on Earth, the seas were 130 feet higher. That level of sea level rise would wipe out Long Island, most of New York City, and about half of New Jersey, not to mention what it would do in low-income countries throughout the world, in Asia, Africa, and South America. Ocean acidification may now be the most intense in 300 million years, and acidic pH is projected to become so severe by the end of this century that it will create an acidic marine environment well beyond what fish and other marine organisms can tolerate. And as we've all read recently, over 1 million species are at risk of extinction, and we're wiping out a species at a rate of about 1 every 20 minutes. As our friend Bill McKibben has written recently, quote, "There should be a word for when you commit treason against the entire planet," close quote. Despite what we know, a New York Times headline just 2 days ago declared, quote, "Grim outlook at UN climate talk with leaders unmoved," close quote. The Times reported on political leaders hostile to our protests and who use denial of climate science to score political points. But science is not just another opinion, and it is a fact that our future is growing shorter. We need to get beyond combustion as fast as we can because burning fossil fuels is literally killing us. Burning fossil fuels is shortening lives at an unimaginable scale. According to the medical journal The Lancet, exposure to air pollution from combustion caused more than 122 million years of lost life just in 2015 alone, with children in sub-Saharan Africa and South Asia being the primary victims. So, about today's panel. The United Nations Framework on Climate Change promotes a gender-responsive climate policy, urging representation of women in all decision-making related to climate policies for good reasons that Amma outlined. Similarly, as you know, the UN Sustainable Development Goals also focus on promoting gender equality. So it is with this in mind that it is very satisfying, in fact, inspiring, to note the influential role played by women promoting sustainability in sports throughout the world. Collectively, women sustainability leaders have changed sports and have changed Broadway, and in so doing, they have broadened the reach and the relevance of the environmental movement. Let me list some examples, and bear with me because I know it's hard to deal with lists. When it comes to sustainability policies in sports, global leadership is, I think, most intelligently defined by the International Olympic Committee's sustainability strategy. And that work at the IOC is led entirely by women. Marie d'Embreville, Michelle Lemaitre, Julie Doufus, and Lise Van Long. At the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, it is Lendita Zaferi who leads the Sport for Climate Action sector. It is a woman, Hyona Kim, who oversaw sustainability for the 2018 Paralympic Winter Games. And in Paris, it is Georgina Grenon, who oversees sustainability for Paris 24 Olympics. And in LA 28, it's also women, Brent Culp and Ann Duffy, who are overseeing sustainability for LA 28. Claire Poole in the UK at Sports Positive is doing more than anyone alive to mobilize convocations for sustainability advocates throughout the sports world. And in Australia, Dr. Sheila Nguyen is the founder and executive director of Australia's Sport Environment Alliance. At the NBA, it's Kathy Behrens, who created NBA Green, the NBA Green program with the commissioner. And at the NHL, Kim Davis and Alicia Chin work with Omar Mitchell to implement one of the most effective sustainability programs in all of sports. Beatty Grupp and Kira Rita oversee sustainability at the International Ice Hockey Federation, and Sarah Lewis oversees sustainability at the International Ski Federation, and Carol Cahoon oversees sustainability at the International Climbing and Mountaineering Federation. At the National Football League, it's Anna Isaacson who oversees sustainability with support from Susan Groh and Jack Groh. The greening program at the U.S. Tennis Association was started by Billie Jean King and me, and has been implemented since its inception more than a decade ago by Lauren Tracy, working side by side with Bina Indelicato. At Roland Garros, at the French Tennis Federation, sustainability is overseen by Vivian Fraz-Radinez. Women also rule in sustainability in soccer. At Major League Soccer, JoAnn Neale oversees sustainability responsibilities along with Jan Greenberg, while Helen Taylor in the UK, one of the world's top sustainability experts, holds the position of Chief Executive of Forest Green Rovers. Here in New York, Jessica Robinson and Ali Crisquelo oversee sustainability for the New York Roadrunners and the New York City Marathon. And in motorsports, Catherine Coomer created and led NASCAR Green, while at Formula E, Julia Palais oversees global sustainability work. Julia also serves as the president of SandSI, Sport and Sustainability International. At the International Motorsports Federation, it was Katja Hernandez who created the sustainability program. In sailing, it's Wendy Schmidt and Amy Munro and Anna Cecile Turner and Susie Thompson and Megan Jones all oversee the Volvo Ocean Race, Land Rover Bars Ocean Race, and Sail GP. What's remarkable about this list of ecologically committed women in sport is how incomplete it is. There are literally scores of women that I'm not naming who are designing sustainability strategies in sports, at leagues, teams, and venues. In Broadway, the cultural gateway to New York, Susan Sampliner and Jennifer Hershey created the Broadway Green Alliance more than a decade ago, which now has international reach from London to LA and Chicago. Reviewing this list of active, incredible women undertaking challenging, complex policies, technical challenges, cultural challenges, business challenges, these extraordinary women trying to navigate a complex business ecosystem to address the greatest existential threat humanity has ever faced. When you think about what they're doing and you think about their agenda, it is just bewildering how Forbes magazine just last month can include only one woman on its recently published list of the 100 most innovative leaders in business. I don't know what planet they are living on. So today, we're going to hear from some of the most extraordinarily influential sustainability leaders in the world, not only in the world of sport, but in the world. If humanity does manage to escape the harshest consequences of climate change, it will be in no small part due to the accomplishments of women like you're going to hear today, who now rule in sport and sustainability. They are leading a cultural shift. The most important thing we could do is change cultural attitudes, cultural expectations about how we relate to the planet. How do you change people's minds? How do you change behavior? They are making it happen. So, with that introduction, I'd like to introduce our panelists. And first, I'm going to introduce Kathy Behrens, the President of Social Responsibility and Player Programs at the NBA. JoAnn Neale, the President and Chief Administrative Officer at Major League Soccer. Lauren Tracy, the Senior Director for Sustainability and Strategic Initiatives at the U.S. Tennis Association. And Jennifer Hershey, the co-founder of the Broadway Green Alliance and the former Vice President for 31 years of theater operations for Jujamcyn Broadway theaters. And now we're going to start our conversation.
Great. So tell us about the sustainability initiatives you all are leading at your various organizations. What are the goals? Where do you see these initiatives going in 5 to 20 years? Give us the roadmap.
Yeah, please. So I'm with the Broadway Green Alliance, which started in 2008. In 2007, Inconvenient Truth came out, and it was basically a call to action to the Broadway community to something needed to be done. Now, the Broadway community, which is a very collaborative group of people, have responded very well to crises in the past, the work that we did with the AIDS crisis, with Broadway Cares, Equity Fights AIDS. So this was nothing new to us, but this was quite daunting. So with Alan's leadership, we had a town hall, we all got together and we started this grassroots organization, and we thought, what can we do to lower the carbon footprint of Broadway, inspire theater goers, inspire theater makers to adapt better practices. And it's been a very slow growing movement. Alan has taught us over the years, you just take every baby step, baby step, baby step. And at this point, we're now in a very large organization that has influenced our great platform of 14 million theater goers that come to Broadway Theater every year. And our objective is to continue to elevate our platform and message, use Broadway as a platform to message hope, change, practices, anything that we can do to stimulate people paying attention to what's going on this earth.
Great. Thank you, Jennifer. Lauren, do you want to?
Sure. So our focus is on the U.S. Open. That's our bread and butter, huge bake sale to run the mission of the organization. So our sustainability program is over 10 years old. We've been working on it for 12 years. Just like you, Jennifer, we started in 2008. Really put this stake in the ground at the 2008 US Open and said, this is when we're going to start to make a shift towards focusing on lessening the environmental footprint of the event through work with Alan, of course, Billie Jean King. For those tennis fans out there, the US Open is held at the USTA Billie Jean King National Tennis Center. And when the facility earned Billie Jean King's name, she turned to us and said, well, what are you doing at this fabulous facility and during this fantastic event to lessen the environmental footprint of all the folks who are coming through? It's one of the highest annual attended events in the world. And so, we really do feel it's a responsibility to try and lessen that impact that it has.
That's really great. JoAnn, do you want to tell us a little bit about Major League Soccer?
Sure. So we started our social responsibility platform back in 2007, so it hasn't really been around that long, and our commitment to green initiatives has evolved over that period of time. We've always had a week of service where we call it our Greener Goals Week of Service. Our clubs, our players, our front offices get out and give back to the communities in some way that has a positive impact on the environment, whether it's planting trees or cleanups. And then we also, a couple of years ago was at Allen, we started to buy offsets to reduce our carbon footprint, and partnered with Allen, who gave us great counsel, and South Pole. And over the last couple of years, we've evolved that so that we're offsetting our carbon footprint for our entire regular season, all of our travel, and game operations. And our goal is to continue to evolve so that everything that we're doing as a league, as an enterprise, that we're looking for ways to not only not adversely affect the environment, but also leave a positive legacy and give back in a way that contributes to the future and what we can do as a sport. As other leaders have said, we have in being in sports, a unique power to influence people. And so some of what we're trying to do is not only just give back and leave a positive legacy, but also impact our fans and communicate and talk about the issues that are out there. So that's another key objective of what we're trying to do.
Great. Kathy, do you want to round us out?
My turn, sure. First of all, it's great to be here with these great women. And Alan gave us some credit. We listening to his remarks backstage, and I just want to say that I think for all of us, you've all heard us mention Alan's name as we talk about the work that we've done. And so certainly for us at the NBA, we wouldn't be as active and engaged in this space and have made the progress we've made if we didn't have Alan's leadership and guidance along the way. So I really want to thank you for that. Because we're a basketball league, and when we were thinking about the different ways that we could have influence in our communities, not only here in the United States, but around the world, and kinds of issues that we cared about, we needed the expertise that Alan and then at the time the NRDC helped provide, and to help our teams think about all the ways that we could improve our operations, could improve the way we were even doing things as small as recycling in our arenas. And every step of the way, we've relied on the expertise and the guidance of people who know this space, frankly, better than we do, and who help us, again, both sort of look at all of our operations, all of our facilities, all of our arenas, whether they're existing arenas, new arenas, arenas undergoing renovation. We know we have a big footprint, and we know that we're all sort of, causing harm to the planet if we don't try to reduce that footprint, and if we don't try to help elevate the discussion and focus on the things that we can do. So I would just say everything is a step, and sometimes it's 2 steps forward and a few steps back. And so we're very mindful of of what we're doing. We talk to our teams all the time about things that they can do in their local communities, things that they can do in their buildings. We have big buildings. Thousands of people come to games every year, millions of people watch around the world. We can reach people. We could talk about these issues. But we've got to take incremental steps where we can to make sure that everything we're doing is environmentally sensitive and hopefully sustainable. And I think we've made good progress, but we don't spend a lot of time patting ourselves on the back. We're always trying to think about what else we can do and how we can get better and learn, frankly, from other organizations. I think this is a space where collaboration and cooperation is really critical. So we know we can learn from everything that other people are doing.
How do you gauge interest by your partners, by your sponsors, by your fans, by any other stakeholders? You're all, a mosaic of relationships, and it's such an extraordinarily diverse mosaic. How do you gauge whether they're supportive or not supportive, or does that matter or not matter? I suspect it does matter.
It helps. Support helps, but I don't think I don't think that you can sort of say, well, on a scale of 1 to 10, how important is this issue? I think we have to recognize that we think it's important, and our teams have to understand that. And so I think, part of our job is educating our own internal touch points. We have not only the NBA, we have the WNBA, we have the 2K League, we have the G League. So we've got lots of constituents, and so I think our job is to share the information, talk about the ideas, talk about the programs, try to ensure that it's a priority, and I think that we've done that. We're not so focused on whether or not people say, oh, that's a good thing, or I'm going to follow. We just got to keep at it, because the job is big enough and requires you to stay at it and kind of not get thrown off course. So I think that's what we try to do with it.
Right.
And and to echo that, it really is about having those conversations and keeping the dialogue open with your vendors, with, of course, your fans, and we have a variety of surveys that we try to engage our fans to get feedback on not only the sustainability efforts that we're doing at the Open, but about the concessions. Just again, you want that feedback, which is important. But again, having that dialogue, especially with your sponsors, and getting a good understanding of where they stand in this space. I mean, it's been a real evolution, and I'm sure we've all seen it from when we started, all of us, over 10 years ago. To see the reception on how more receptive some people are to those conversations throughout your touch points in running a large sporting event, which has been a positive thing. Those conversations they're better than they were, I have to say, over 12 years ago, which is a good message to communicate.
For us, and I think that's right, there are varying degrees of education depending on who your audience is, but we have a very young fan base, and so fortunately, very active and care a lot about the environment and environmental issues and green issues. So the narrative for us is it's easy to collect that data. We're constantly pulsing and reaching out to our fans to find out, to gain better insights for not only this space, but for our business as a whole. And fortunately, they're very, very focused on green and the environment. So that just having that information helps with the narrative and selling it into those who we need to sell it into, the commitment, and to be able to move the needle. So that in and of itself is great. Our fans are very, very active in the space, and we try to continue to engage them when we do volunteer events, reach out, ask them to join us, doing, as Kathy, I think, mentioned, events at the stadium, recycling. We actually, at our All-Star game this year, tried to create a full economic cycle, I think, is how we termed it, where we took plastic, from the stadium. It was just recycled and then made into park benches, which we then donated to a local school. So trying to do things like that where you can give back to those who may need it a little bit more while also doing something positive for the environment, or ways that we try to weave the stories together. But it's always challenging because there are so many organizations when you work in social responsibility that are so worthy, and it's hard to focus on one area over another, and really hard to say no to causes that are important, and there are so many of them. But in this particular case, I feel like we are so fortunate because obviously it is a huge crisis, but because we have our fans that are also so active in the space, it really is helpful to us.
I'd say for the theater community, our fan base is easy to get to through social media. I mean, for the student strike on Friday, for example, the kids that are in Harry Potter put together, there was a video of them all speaking about why they were supporting the strike. And something like that, you put that out there, and it just gets so many hits. So it reaches your fan base. So again, that platform is easy for us. We just have to kind of come up with the content by using our stars and our productions. Now for the theater makers, the people actually making the shows, I've noticed such a difference in the last few years. I mean, you look at a show like Frozen, which is in a Jujamcyn theater. I mean, there are 7 million LED lights and little diodes in that show, and a ton of CO2 used to create that frozen tundra. And there was a lot of pre-production meetings and a lot of discussion before the show ever went up of how are we going to deal with these conditions? How can we remediate? How can we cool the space? What can we do to keep the air flowing well so that our air conditioning costs aren't exorbitant? And this is all stuff that's, we never used to think about this. A costume designer used to just say, oh, I want a wool costume. But now they're thinking, well, maybe the actor's going to be a little hot. Maybe we need to think of a different material so that we don't have to have the air conditioning on blasting all the time. So I think it's for us, it's both ends. It's both production and it's our fan base. And we're definitely engaged and making efforts.
Yeah, I want to go back to this thread of fans. So what do you all think your fan base can do to support you and support your efforts?
Well, I think for us, again, going back to the sort of the tips, I think our job is to educate fans about things that they can do. And I'm not sure the individual fan is going to go buy carbon offsets, but the individual fan can think about 4 or 5 things that they can do in their own life that can make a difference in the environment. And even just elevating the discussion. I mean, I think we all know that JoAnn said it right, there are millions of issues and competing interests, and try to keep this in the forefront. You can't always do that, but when you elevate the discussion, or when you sort of out of nowhere kind of put something out there and fans aren't expecting it, we have a great reach the same way everybody else up here does with our fans in our buildings, on social media, on our broadcasts. So if we can put out easy to learn, easy to digest, green messages about things that people can do, steps people can take, I think that's where we can communicate to our fans. And when they see players or teams do something that touches on this space, they respond to it. And so I think there's more we can always do around that. But we've got an ability to amplify and to elevate a discussion, and so we try to do that as best we can.
So, do you want to say something? Yeah. Outside of the family, the most influential role models are athletes and entertainers. I know Jennifer, having spent, actually the Broadway Green Alliance was the model that NRDC used to create the Green Sports Alliance. What was interesting though, in Broadway, they were able to get famous actors, like every theater has a green captain.
Right.
And because of a lot of Jennifer's work and Susan Sampliner. And I mean, these were not just like, the sanitation help. These were famous.
No, like Brian Cranston was a
Right.
Green captain,
Right.
Audra McDonald, I mean,
Right,
sure.
right. So how is it in my experiences, I mean, I'm Billy, of course, but it was post-career. How, do you ever, I know you have Matumbo, I mean, are you able to connect with your athletes on this issue? That's a question that I get so frequently is, can you get Tom Brady, can you get, some, LeBron James?
Yeah, nobody's ever asked me that.
I think it has to be authentic. I mean,
Say again?
it has to be authentic to them. I'm sure we could pay some of these bigger names to talk about a cause, but unless it's true to their heart, I don't think it has the same impact. And you can kind of tell when somebody really is speaking from the heart and it matters to them, and when it doesn't. So I think those things evolve over time and are a little bit organic. We actually partner, you asked about partners, so we work with Adidas and for our games during Earth Day that weekend, they all wear jerseys in partnership with Parlay for the Ocean, so recycled oceanic plastic made into jerseys, and that's a great opportunity. We obviously make sure that the players are aware of what we're doing, and the clubs are aware, and then to the extent that there's a natural connection and it resonates, those guys then retweeting something out, and they have millions of followers versus some of the other channels. So when it happens like that organically, and it just is continuing, you got to walk before you run, and educate the guys, and hopefully, you get a couple that it really matters to, and then it just kind of takes off.
I wonder if some of the big athletes are so tied into some sponsorships that maybe, prevent them from being able to make sometimes I always wonder, are they like promoting something? Are they doing an ad for something that maybe they can't make a statement about the climate crisis because it might affect an endorsement deal that they have? I always wonder how hooked in some of these guys are, or men or women athletes are, to their personal, their endorsements that they're doing. Do you think that has any impact?
I think it depends. I mean, JoAnn's right in terms of it being genuine and authentic, and certainly, I think I can only speak, we have 450 players in the NBA, 144 in the WNBA. They're all different. They all have different passions and different things that they really care about and are involved in. And so trying to find the right opportunity for them is one of the things that we do. But they're also focused on what those issues are and what that means to them and how involved they want to be. I think, we bring issues to players all the time to talk about things that are important, and teams are doing the same thing. And so it really depends. I don't believe that players, not my experience anyway, that they're concerned about their sponsors in speaking out on things. Certainly, our players, I think, feel comfortable doing that, and we encourage them to do that. But I think it doesn't just have to be the famous athlete. I appreciate Alan's question in terms of the influence and awareness that they have, but truthfully, if you sort of are doing the work behind the scenes, a team president or a team owner or general manager can be just as influential in the process. And so, in Portland, for example, when that organization, our Portland Trailblazers, the Moda Center, they were incredibly focused on making the Moda Center the most environmentally sustainable building in any of our arenas. And so they didn't need a player to sort of be involved in that effort, and that impact is extraordinary. As new buildings come online, our teams are thinking about things that they never thought before in terms of sustainability and being environmentally progressive. That doesn't need a player's endorsement to get behind that. So it doesn't have to just be one lane in this space. I think that's one of the things that we've really learned and try to share with our teams is we're all sort of responsible for it. And one of the ways that we've tried to do that is, not only, I love the idea of green captains. That's a great idea. Maybe we'll steal that. We've done these green committees at our teams, and because you want to get everybody to buy into it, we've done it at the league office. I think that's another way to make sure that there are many voices involved. But, sometimes people think, the best player, the LeBron Jameses of the world, have to be the person who's the spokesperson for it, and I just don't think that's the case.
Fantastic. What are your biggest challenges? What's the hard, what is the hardest stuff for you, for you to navigate? What are the barriers to progress?
I think I would say some of it's what JoAnn mentioned before, just sort of competing interests. I think trying to keep this issue as a priority. We all have a lot of incoming, everybody does, but I think, the real barrier is just making sure that we keep pushing that this has to be a priority. It's the only planet we've got. We've got to do our best with it. I think we believe in the sort of incremental steps and progress. I'm not sure, we didn't just get here overnight, so we're not going to fix it overnight. So I think trying to take a long-term view, but having urgency. And that's a hard balance, I think. So we've, as I said before, we feel like we've made progress in our work and in our efforts, but there's certainly a lot more we can do. We realize we'd have a big footprint, so we got to keep pushing our teams.
I know from my interaction, we started to try to do measurement, greenhouse gas measurement, 10 years ago. And everybody on stage is there. Your leagues are measuring, identifying opportunities for reduction. But I know that it's taken years because, at the league level, Kathy, JoAnn, and Lauren, you have a single event. You're at your office, you could get things done, but you've got 30 teams, 30 venues, more than 30 owners, getting the venue operators to measure in the same way. That took a tremendous amount of work, and I want everyone to understand that we've been working on measuring for 10 years and identifying opportunities for reduction and sharing that information for 10 years. And then a lot of folks don't know, but there's all different kinds of offsets. Of course, the offset market has evolved. In Europe, it's now a compliance market. It's still voluntary here, but because of what happened in Europe with the regulations, the offset markets have become really very robust. And you folks are all investing in offsets that are literally saving lives in some of the poorest countries, poorest communities in Africa. Kenya, Rwanda, Mozambique, Zimbabwe, just extraordinary, and folks don't know about that, and I think people should know about that. So I just wanted to get that out there, because I know we're talking about all different kinds of things, plastics, this and that, but you guys have a very, very robust carbon initiative, and it's just getting bigger and growing. Yeah. Do you want to?
Yeah, so I guess I'm just so impressed by what you all are doing with your platforms, and I'm wondering what other corporate actors might have to learn from you all. What do you have to teach them? What do you think you have to learn from other corporate actors in this space?
I'll let you ladies go.
Well, I joke about this all the time. I feel like I've built a career off drafting off of these other leagues because they've been ahead of us for so long. We're only, approaching 25 years old as a league. So fortunately, we've been able to learn so much from these folks. And I think you mentioned Catherine Coomer at NASCAR. And really, so we learned about the cook stove projects in Kenya from a meeting, again, that Alan organized with a small group of representatives from the leagues and in the space, and Catherine and the Yankees were talking about what they were doing, and that's how we learned about it. And I don't know, for those here that don't know about the project, it really, to me, I got really excited about it. in kind of a dorky way, because it's like the intersection of offsetting your carbon footprint, but also having a positive impact on the local community in Kenya, whether the economics of the community and also the health of the women and children. And what it is buying these cook stoves, which are a much healthier way for those communities to be cooking. And often, the vast majority, it's women and young children who are cooking and who are being exposed to toxins that cause cancer. So for me, it was like the trifecta of, okay, we're doing something positive for the environment, we're helping economically disadvantaged communities by protecting the forests, and also impacting the lives of the women and children in those communities who will no longer be inhaling toxins. So it's an amazing story, and that I got really excited about, and I think committed to that day. And we just continue to try to grow that every year. So I think what's so amazing about this work is being able to combine it in different ways, that you have an impact that impacts lots of different people in ways that you wouldn't otherwise expect. So to me, that's such an exciting and unique way to really do something positive.
Yeah, I think that's, I have to echo that, because we also, purchased onto the humanitarian offsets. And for years, we were offsetting our carbon, the carbon that's generated from players traveling internationally to come and compete at the US Open. The employees, there's about 9,000 employees who come and work for the seasonal employees for 2 weeks, offsetting their carbon footprint. And, we were just purchasing Greenie certified, offsets. And then when Alan presented this humanitarian aspect to it, it just was, it's a great opportunity to do more, the only,
Brilliant.
It's brilliant. And the only way for us, was having that conversation, for all of us finding
And we were there too.
discussions.
So,
And
we got involved also. So it was great the way we brought all of us together, sports and theater. And, it's not a competition.
Right.
I mean, sports is a competition, but we're not competing with each other.
Winning's good,
We're,
but
we're all in this together. And even from the theater world, where there's Jujamcyn, there's Schubert, there's Niederlander, I mean, sure, we all want to have the hit show. Everybody wants the hit show. But we're all working on this crisis together. And we're all sharing resources together. This never happened years ago. Nobody talked to each other. Everybody kept their secrets. Now it's like, hey, I can call up the guy at Schubert and say, look what we did to our roofs. We're putting this product on our roofs, and we're lowering the temperature in our grids by 8% by putting this product on the roof. Oh, that's cool. Who did you use? Oh, this is the vendor we used. Oh, great. Give me the name. So it's like a collaboration. It's sharing resources. It's a great thing not to feel like, I don't care if someone steals my ideas. Stake them.
right.
yeah, I think that's a sort of underappreciated aspect of a lot of the work that organizations, the ones that are up here and others that we all work with. I mean, there's a lot more sharing of sort of best practices.
Right.
Even for us among our teams, that's what we're out there talking all the time about. Look at what this team has done here, and doesn't mean that, oh, they're better than you, but our teams aren't the same. And
Right.
so, they can learn from each other and pick some things that are going to work in their markets. Our markets aren't the same, our cities aren't the same. So there's so much more, I think, that sort of is commonality, and what we learn from each other and learn from other organizations can be applied. And I think there's a lot more of that than people probably appreciate.
By the way, I just want folks to know, when we started the Broadway Green Alliance, Jennifer ran the venue committee, and people should know that this person instigated the changing of every light bulb in every marquee in Broadway.
A lot of like that.
A A lot of light bulbs, except...
She changed them by herself.
Actually, it was over 100,000 light bulbs on the marquees of Broadway, which saves about 700 tons of carbon a year.
And Jennifer called me and says, but the show Hair, they want this 1960s look, so they're insisting on incandescent, and there's nothing I can do about it. So civilization has its costs.
No, but wait, we got the right kind of bulbs and we dipped them in red dye. So we did solve that problem.
I mean, the details are amazing, changing the washers and dryers, you know, and boy, did we have a fist fight with the publisher of Playbill. There's 44 million Playbills distributed every year. Wow. And I'm not going to report to you how little is comprised of recycled content, because that's a fist fight that we're still involved with. We'll get there.
Alan and I will get there.
Why are there so many women ruling sustainability in sport? I mean, when you look at, I was reading something about athletic directors in the power conferences, the 65 power conferences, and I read that there were only 4 women athletic directors. Don't quote me on that, that's what I recall. But it's sort of like that. But in this space, it is just extraordinary and wonderful. But why is that? I mean, football, basketball, baseball, hockey, soccer, Broadway, tennis, International Olympic Committee, motorsports. Why?
Why do you think?
Why? Because we get the job done. I mean, you know, that's what we do. We just jump in and solve a problem. I don't know. I mean, I can remember back in the 60s of, you know, fighting for women's rights, out of the kitchen into the streets. Thank God we came out and we're fighters. We're scrappy.
You don't remember the 50s.
The 60s.
60s, okay.
I said 60s. Okay. But I don't know. I just, gosh, any of you were at Al Gore had a panel of the young youth climate leaders up at Ethical Culture the other night, and 5 young women on the stage from 14 to 21 leading all of these issues, leading all these movements from it's amazing. They're all young women. I'm not sure why. I think it feels like it's a woman's thing to figure this out. I don't know. What do you guys think?
I'm not going to add anything to that.
We get it done. We just do it.
Well, there are studies, you know, Yale came out with a study that, you know, women tend to be more, you know, sensitive to this issue, more empathic, more committed to this issue. And is that really what it is? It's just that there is a agenda bias towards humanitarian connectivity, and that's reflected in the work that you folks have taken on? I mean, is it really?
You know, I will say, I think it's a good thing, but you got to be honest, we're not going to be able to solve it ourselves. And so if, you know, it's like everything else, diversity is going to be good for the environment. And so that means there's got to be more people at the table. It shouldn't just be, and I don't think it is in our organization, that it's just women leading this fight. I mean, everybody, this is a thing everybody has got to get behind and start to really focus on how organizations can move this issue forward, and frankly work across all sectors, because this is not something that governments are going to be able to do. They've proven that they can't. And so, you know, this is the private sector, this is governments, this is religious organizations, this is education, this is nonprofit organizations. Right. This has got to be everybody across the board, and it can't just be women leaders as well. I think women are obviously incredibly important to the movement and have proven that they're leaders in it, but it's got to pick up some momentum.
Yeah, I mean, I know there's.
You're not a bad guy in this business.
Yeah,
we'll keep you.
I know there's, you know, men, but really, when you look at leadership. By the way, I don't know. We're going to be taking questions from the audience. Whoever has those index cards can bring them to Amber and I, and we'll start looking in that direction as well. Do you want to?
Yeah, I guess I'm wondering, looking back, so it sounds like there's been a lot of change in your industries, that things are getting better. It's possible to change 100,000 light bulbs in a way it wasn't possible to do 40 years ago. I'm wondering, looking back, what do you think what have you learned? What do you have to say to young women who are trying to lead sustainability efforts? I guess what would you do differently now? And what would you say to young women who are trying to get involved in this work?
Yeah, if I could just add one amendment to that question, which is because what would you recommend to women who want to get into this field? I mean, there's a lot. I mean, I get calls every week, a few times. I want to get into this. I want to get into it. What would you recommend? How do you, what advice would you give to young women or men, but young women who want to be you?
I mean, I think it would be the same advice for any young person who is passionate about a cause or an issue. It's first, know your facts, do your research, and then I always say to young people, a great way to get involved in something is to volunteer. You can volunteer and you can really learn, and then you can articulate the issues in a way that are meaningful and that resonate with the people that you need them to resonate with. And then once you get your foot in the door, you work hard and you have to put your head down and do the work. And that's what I think sometimes younger people coming into an organization are just so focused on the future and not the here and now, which is the only thing that you can really impact. So come in, do the work hard, be passionate, and then things will follow from there. And that's in really any career that you're trying to go into.
My only other, I think that's all exactly right. And my other piece of advice is always just to rely on the experts. I mean, we're not, as I said in the beginning, I think, I'm not an expert in this field by any stretch of the imagination. And so for us, it's how do you rely on good partners and good partnerships to get the work done and to advance it and to, you can't know everything. And so building partnerships, cooperation, collaboration, that's how you're going to make progress.
And I would say, just be very curious, to be, to believe in, to be an activist, and to never be embarrassed to ask the question, because no question is stupid. And I think a lot of times women just, they're afraid to speak up and just ask a question. I say just ask the question. No question is dumb. Be curious, be active, be, out there. That's how I think you have to just keep moving forward and practice it, practice the work. You have to really believe what it is you're doing.
And I think you have to sometimes also give yourself a break, because this is really hard work. And there are times where you're going to make a mistake. We've had mistakes as we've rolled out our program. We have all these plans gearing up into the US Open, and we're going to, have compostable serviceware in the food village. Everything's going to be compostable, and the US Open starts and we're gearing on and we're walking through the food village, and it was like, oh, the stirrers. Never forgot about the coffee stirrers. And so it's just these little things, and then US Open's going on, and we'll just lesson learned. And so you need to be able to give yourself room, and the people around you have to give you have that room to make those mistakes.
Yeah, we're all learning.
Yeah,
we're all learning.
we are.
It is hard work, and there's so many details. My work, I was a scientist at NRDC for 28 years doing industrial ecology, but I got into sports because I was focused on the paper industry, in particular the toilet paper industry, because ecologically rare, irreplaceable forests are being cut down. In fact, NRDC did a panel about this yesterday. Ecologically irreplaceable forests are being cut down to make toilet paper. Forests that have existed for hundreds, if not thousands of years, are being cut down to make a product that we use for like 5 seconds. And I got invited to meet with the Philadelphia Eagles football team and discovered that the toilet paper that they were using at their stadium came from eagle habitat, which was kind of an anti-branding risk for them. And next thing you know, they immediately changed that, and they said, what else could we do? But there's so many details.
So many.
And there's also cultural barriers to sustainability. Standard operating procedures, existing contracts, political bias. I mean, I won't name a name, but a very prominent member of a very prominent league, nobody represented here, said, he goes, Alan, I know that I disagree with everything you stand for. He goes, but you save me money, so I'm willing to work with you. But I don't believe in anything you're talking about. So we had to focus on the dollars, which is, actually a good way to do it. So we have some questions from the audience, and do you want to? We haven't reviewed them. We haven't reviewed them. Hopefully, somebody else has reviewed them.
I'll start you off with an easy one. It's hard, so get ready. So this from the audience: if we have only 11 years to reduce greenhouse gas emissions by 45%, what will your organizations do that's big? Could be supporting carbon pricing legislation, putting climate action specific PSAs on all broadcasts. But if we really have 11 years to do this, what big actions are your organizations going to take?
Well, who wants to go first?
I don't know, honestly, if I were, I think that would be something that we would, to Kathy's point, go to the experts and kind of solicit some counsel on things that we could do that could move the needle in a bigger way. Where we all are not experts, except for these guys, in this space. At least I'll speak for myself. I am not, and I kind of just grew into this, and I'm learning every day, and that's why I love to be around these folks who are all much smarter than I am in this space. And so, it's hard to say what we would or wouldn't do. I think there's, we'd have to really think about it and think hard and work with some experts and try to figure it out.
I mean, now, at least for us, what we're trying to bring more of our partners, our sponsors, start having more conversations about the work that we're doing. This year I brought all the corporate social responsibility and sustainability representatives from all of our sponsors together at the Open this year and said, let's all just get in a room and frankly, let's meet each other. And let's have a conversation. Let's start having that dialogue. And it'd be great for you to do things at the US Open, but maybe American Express, you have a conversation with Ralph Lauren, and there's maybe a synergy that can happen entirely outside of tennis. That's great too, because we're all working towards the same goal. And I think that's really how this progress can be made, and it's using our platforms to communicate this message and get fans and get people engaged and to continue the conversation. I mean, there's a real focus obviously this week with the UN, but I think it's making sure that we're having this conversation all of the time, and that's the only way that you're going to have some serious impact.
I mean, it's very challenging to lower your carbon footprint on Broadway. It's the Great White Way. It's all about lights and production, and I'm sitting here today and I'm thinking, I'm under some lights and I'm really nice and comfortable in this audience right now. And I'm thinking, you guys are all really comfortable in this air-conditioned space. And I'm thinking, one of the ways that we could really save money and save carbon is to educate audiences. Why does it have to be so cold in our theater? Like, if you go to London, it's not cold in the theaters there. And I think, gosh, I'm going to start a campaign to lower the temperature of Broadway a couple of degrees, because I think that would have a huge impact. And I think it's all about educating you guys, it's hard. You've spent $300 on a ticket. You don't want to be hot sitting in the theater. So I think there are things that can be done. It's just everybody's going to have to pitch in.
Yeah, I would just remind everybody that, there's non-state actors and there's government. And the Paris Agreement actually emphasizes non-state actors, but I don't know what a big thing is. like there is no big thing that's going to solve the problem. I'm thinking of work that my colleagues and I at NRDC did with Walmart. They have the largest truck fleet, second to the Pentagon. The average fuel efficiency of the trucks was 13 miles per gallon, and we got it to go up to 17 miles a gallon, over a period of years, and it made, it adds up. But there's so many, I don't know what a big thing is. I mean, a big thing would be at the government level, stop funding fossil fuels, stop subsidizing fossil
Carbon
fuels,
fee.
ban fracking, close down coal. But government right now is, part of the problem. So I think, people don't appreciate how complicated and difficult it is to do even little things. Right now, I've been spending weeks modifying the composting and recycling labels at Yankee Stadium in the suites. There already are labels, but we have to, but we're saying, you know what, we think there might be a better way. And I mean, we've got like 3 of us plus an NGO that we're collaborating on the labels. And, and they're diverting over 90% of their waste, and you're doing 97% of your waste. But
isn't I think that's to JoAnn's point before. That's what we've learned from you in this process, is that it's not, one big thing, nice big splash, that's great.
Right.
It is literally every day, lots of, and some of them are big things, but they're not, but if you do, if you say here's a checklist of 10 things, and you can only get 4 done, that's 4 good things that got done.
Right.
And
Right.
so we got to keep pushing at those issues. And I think we have to, the Dallas Mavericks yesterday announced that they were going to do carbon offsets for all their charter travel. So it's like, okay, let's get that out to all the teams now, because our teams are going to say, oh, good, how do we do that? Who can we work with? How do we get that? Right. So we can get more teams to do that. Like, that's a great thing. Now, is it the big thing? I don't think you can think about it big or small. You just got to get after it. And that's, I think, where we've got to keep pushing at.
And there's also some, people still need to be sold on this. So taking smaller steps is safer. I know with Major League Soccer, JoAnn, we started just measuring a few executive travel for a few people at some of your events. And then that grew to more of your staff, and then that grew to, well, let's do the events. And then it became, oh, let's do the, you got to also, I know part of my work is to make sure that you're not engendering branding or, greenwashing liabilities. Mm-hmm. It's got to be authentic. Mm-hmm. So, all right, I'm going to ask a question from the audience. How are your associations addressing the food not only served in your facilities, but are there sustainable plant-based food programs in place for the athletes and coaching staff?
I'm going to answer that first, because there was a story today about a number of our players who have gone on plant-based diets and who actually were investing in, I think it's Impossible Meat?
Impossible Burger, yeah.
Impossible Burger. And so it was an interesting story. It was a combination of how much money they've made on the IPO, but also that it's a sort of growing, I don't want to call it a fad, but like a growing thing in our league where players are going to like plant-based diets, and so I know a lot of our buildings are doing the same. I mean, the food offerings in our arenas, I think, I would say this across the board, I don't think there's a better sort of food experience in a sporting event than the US Open, but I think we're all trying to think about the food offerings. Again, when you think about the checklist, the food and not only how it's made, where it's made, everything that you're offering is a priority, and that's on the list.
If agriculture was a country, it would be the 3rd largest generator of global warming pollution. I know for a number of teams that I'm involved in, we're beginning to measure, we're trying to develop climate-friendlier menus without anyone noticing. Because people, we're in the suites, we're taking away just a couple of hot dogs at a time. to see, at what point does it get to the point where someone says, "Where's my hot dog?"
But that's progress, right? Because when you think about it, it used to only be hot dogs and beer and popcorn when you would go to any kind of game or
Right.
arena. And so, I mean, I realize that so much of it is daunting, but like there's been real good progress made on things like that.
Right, and also it's so complicated. Like Aramark has 800 suppliers of fish.
Of fish?
Fish, 800 suppliers of fish. Most importantly, they want to make sure that that fish is acquired legally. There are slave ships of people who are fishing, they're never allowed off the ship, and their passports are confiscated. So you want to make sure you're not implicated in that. And then there's organic sourcing and ethical sourcing. And so, I mean, the complexities, I think that's hopefully one of the things that will come out of this conversation is for people to really understand. I mean, if it wasn't hard, we would have solved this problem. And we are here, in New York, with a lot of resources, with a lot of intelligence, with a committed organization. Well, it's not like that around the world. I mean, I just spent last week in Europe meeting with sports federations from around the world, and I mean, there was a lot of despair. There was, folks like you who have the energy, the orientation, but the barriers that they're bumping into in their supply chain and in their management, I'm not going to name names of regions in the world where folks, but look, people are, some people are buying tiger parts in parts of the world. So you want to?
Yeah, I guess I want to say that I don't think we can afford to despair. We just simply don't have enough time. And so to the extent that you meet that, I think it's so important to act from a place of hope and inspiration. But that's not the question from the audience. So
Too bad. That would have been a good one.
yeah, so someone wants to know, can you say more about the role of your corporate sponsors? Are you pulling them in? Are they pushing you to see more action? Are there any interesting examples of league and sponsor collaboration?
Ooh, I have one. We have a really exciting, obviously this really excites me. So this year, Ralph Lauren outfits our ball persons, and so this year the uniforms were made out of 10 PET bottles, and which is a great story. But our point of contact in our sponsorship group at the USTA, she's also on our internal green team, and she works with Ralph Lauren, and Ralph Lauren says, well, do you have any other thoughts on how we can maybe make a story here? And she says, well, I know that our Wilson tennis ball cans, they're collected by our officials group, and that's a nice clean stream. It's just handled by the officiating department. They we can bag them up. Maybe let me put you in touch with Wilson and see maybe if there's an opportunity for you to use the tennis ball cans from this year's US Open to make the ball person uniforms for next year. And that's what they're doing.
That's great.
And so we have a really great example of collaboration, our sponsors working together, us being the conduit, and now for our fans, we have this great chance to say, here's a full life cycle story for you. We can engage ESPN, who is a fantastic corporate citizenship group, for them to help us broadcast it. And so this is what we're talking about in sport, and so it's really exciting. And this was just the starting point. I know that there's going to be more, and so that's my best example right now.
By the way, the head of sustainability at ESPN is Angela Woods, another woman. I just want to point out that Lauren was instrumental. Tennis ball cans, it's changing, but are made of 4 different materials: low-density polyethylene, polyethylene terephthalate, PVC, and aluminum. So recycling those cans was really a challenge, but with the USTA commitment, with Billy and I actually went out to Wilson in Chicago to talk to them about how to redesign the tennis ball can to make it from recycled and to make it more recyclable. And 10 years later, it is beginning to happen, and now they're being more easily recycled into clothing.
How many cans is it? I'm just curious. Oh, like, I don't even have a concept. How many of those?
How many cans? About 17, 18,000
Yeah,
cans?
that's what I was going to say.
17 or
Yeah,
18,000 cans are
18,000.
used during the course of the,
Right.
wow, that's a big.
About 18,000 tennis ball cans
That's a
at
lot.
the Open. And until Lauren started doing what she's doing, they were not being recovered. I mean, this is a highly refined material, petroleum-based material where, 95% of the impacts happen before you open the lid. It's very highly refined, and they were just being discarded. So,
That's good stuff.
this is tennis ball cans, This might be the last question because I don't want to keep people too long, but if you were able to take
That one.
on...
Wait, she had a follow-up there.
Oh, the kids keep them.
Well, better question, what happens to the 60,000 used tennis balls?
So we put them back in our program. So the USA Billie Jean King National Tennis Center is a year-round tennis facility, and we bring in community groups and as many kids as we can to expose them to tennis. And so we just reuse those tennis balls until the end of the tennis ball life. And then schools are reaching out to us to, so that they can get them to put them on the bottom of chairs and things like that. I know that there's a organization called Recycle Balls, who is looking at finding different ways to actually recycle a tennis ball. That's a potential solution for those who may be interested in something like that.
I mean, extraordinary details, and I know, it's Kathy, and I know with all of you, before there was outreach to the teams, we had to clean up the interior offices, change the way coffee was served to the staff, change the paper, double-side the copiers. You're talking about coffee stirrers. I mean, the amount of detailed evaluation that goes into this work, it's extraordinary.
Could I ask you to go back to the food question for just a second? I checked these data with leading radiative forcing experts. If the average American family of 4 were to cut back from their current diet, beef, from just 3 more meals per week for a year, that is equivalent to the average American family of 4 not driving a car for the year. That means that if you were to eliminate beef, I'm not sure hot dogs would have the same impact, but if you were to eliminate actual beef from consumption at athletic events, you would have a massive impact. And this is one of those unusual individual things that really scales up massively. And we urgently need to do some things that scale up massively.
Yeah. I mean, it gets back to the question of, how do you educate people? How do you promote environmental literacy? How do you promote climate literacy? How do you reduce the cultural polarization around that conversation? And then ultimately, how do you change behavior? And how do you do that in the context of the existing economic structure? It was interesting in Lausanne last week, a representative of FIFA, he was like, forget the money, we've got an urgent crisis and we just have to get everybody to do it. And it was, okay, great idea. How do we get them to do it? So, look, I agree with your sentiment. There are people, in the United States who meet 3 times a day.
I used to be one of them.
Okay, so, yeah, I mean, okay, if you were able to take on one new environmental or sustainability project without any hurdles or restrictions, what would you focus on?
I'm going to get rid of the meat in the. I'm not kidding. I'm going to push that. That's first of all, the data on that was fascinating. So
Yeah.
that we'll
Right.
give that to our folks that deal with our concessions. I think that's an interesting, like that. Again, it's so many. The list. We continue to work with Alan and other organizations that give us the what's the data, what are the ideas. We learn from other groups, and we try to push it out to our constituents, to our teams, to our players, to our fans, and just keep at it.
Yeah, and and to the point on data, it's not just that the data is coming from outside, but it has to be authenticated and verified internally. So, I could bring all the data I want to, say, the concessionaire Yankee Stadium, but they're going to want to do their own due diligence on this stuff and their own measurement and see how it relates specifically to their own supply chain. And, of course, a lot of the life cycle upstream impacts, the data are not public. And they're proprietary. So that complicates targeting. But would it be, if there was no restrictions, no barriers, what would you focus on?
Okay, so for me, the two issues are the conditions of the theater. I would definitely try to educate people to not expect it to be so freezing cold in the theater. And number two is I think that it would be greater. I think there was one day that Times Square had a valet bicycle service for people coming to Broadway. It was sort of like, we're celebrating Bike Week. I think that's a brilliant idea. I think, bicycle travel in New York City has to be made better, and I think it needs to be easier to get there and a place to leave your bike, and I would definitely work on that for in my business.
I'm sorry. I was
going to help you out because you would.
Oh, no, I'm chuckling to myself because I'm thinking about our environmental consultant being in Delicado, what her wish would be. And I have to agree with her. It would be fantastic if we had one person standing at every single waste can to tell each fan, that's recyclable. This goes into the other waste.
I'd like that at home for my kids.
True.
Invite the Sierra Club. They send the volunteers at every waste can.
Isn't there a way, as you use advertising in all the real estate you had at United States Open, is there a way to capture some of that advertising and educate the audience that you have focused their attention on what's going on, of what is and what is not recycling? Now, you may not generate a substantial amount of revenue from that, but if the information would allow you to achieve the same goal you just suggested, would be very labor intensive.
Right.
So we've tried that. We've tried in-stadium messaging. We've tried loudspeaker messaging throughout the whole facility. It doesn't seem to work. We've tried we're talking about labels on the waste cans. We had words, and then we've realized words don't work, and so now it's just images.
We had
and
PSAs
symbols.
with Venus and Billy.
Right, and so the most effective are these just little icons on the cans, and people are doing a better job, especially we've seen the evolution over the past decade, but often it's just people aren't paying attention.
No, they don't read signs. They really don't read signs. Most of us don't read signs when we go into public places. We're so distracted. We want to get to our seat. We want to get somewhere. We get very confused, and we always make. I'm a good recycler, and I make mistakes. I come to the can and I have a panic attack, So we've all had this experience. So it's not easy.
Right.
It really isn't easy.
Okay, I'm gonna.
My husband opens the can and he's like, "Who did this?"
Yeah.
He's like, really.
Put this in here.
Yeah, very funny about it.
Look, just on this point, I worked for an environmental advocacy group, and every month we would have our staff meeting, and we would remind people to make sure that, we found that not everybody's complying, and this was an environmental advocacy group. So we're going to do one more question, Amma, and then we're going to...
Before we wrap up, I went to a baseball game recently, and at halftime there was a recycling sorting waste competition between kids, and I just thought that was so great. They were racing in 30 seconds to sort all the trash, and yeah, it was really...
That's a good idea.
It was really engaging, so maybe you can take that back. Okay, so the last question, I'm torn. There are two. One is to me, so I'm going to shelve that.
Let's take that one.
No, but I think there's a way to make this about everyone, which is what inspired you all to work in this field?
Well, the field for me is social responsibility, and I've been in community or government service most of my career. I now just do it at a place that's really about basketball, which is another passion of mine, but I believe in the power of individual people and the importance of individual people contributing to their community, and so it's a thing I've done forever.
Kathy created NBA Cares. I mean, really, I know some influential enviros, and you're among the most people don't realize how incredibly influential you all are in advancing humanitarian sustainability
We learn
work.
from the best.
Right back at you. Just to continue Anna's question, do you want to?
Sure, I mean, the same thing, so I'm not an environmentalist. We work in social responsibility, and this is sort of one area that we focus on. And I mean, for me personally, it's been a passion of mine, just from being mom and having kids and being concerned about the plight and the future. I mean, we were driving one day and my daughter said, our planet is going to be covered in garbage. And it is, and it was very upsetting, and she got really upset about it. So I just think the only way that we're really going to be able to make a change is everybody realizes that you can have an impact. And so to me, using the power of sport to educate is so special, and I feel we are so fortunate to be in a position to to use the voices that we have through our channels and our partners, and to be able to give back. And so to me, when I wake up every day, I just feel so truly blessed to be able to work in a field and for an organization that's committed to this. So very lucky.
And same. The USTA is a mission-based organization with the goal to promote and develop the growth of tennis and make it look like America. I mean, it is a real privilege to be able to go there every day, especially as a mom, and to do the work that I get to do. This is just, the sustainability piece is one thing I focus on, and there's other areas that I focus on within the same social responsibility area. And, as a mom of 2 young boys, I want to try and make as much of an impact while I'm here as I can, because there are kids throughout the world, and we owe this to them, and we owe this to that next generation. And frankly, I owe this to my 2 young boys to be doing the best that I can to make a better world for them.
And I accept that, but I was working with you before you had children. You were doing this before you had.
They inspire me even more today.
So, I mean, for me, I had this job where I was taking care of a chain of Broadway theaters. So I felt this sense of responsibility that after I saw Inconvenient Truth, that, hey, I can really do something. And I'm a very passionate person, if you haven't guessed that already. And I figured I could really do something right here and really get other people on board. So for me, it was a natural fit, just sort of, I just fell into it, and I just became so passionate about inspiring other people to do the same thing. So it was a good fit.
So before we say goodbye and thank you to everybody, I think we have a 1-minute statement from the next Nobel laureate that we want to show.
Oh.
This is all wrong. I shouldn't be up here. I should be back in school on the other side of the ocean. Yet you all come to us young people for hope. How dare you? You have stolen my dreams and my childhood with your empty words, and yet I'm one of the lucky ones. People are suffering, people are dying, entire ecosystems are collapsing. We are in the beginning of a mass extinction, and all you can talk about is money and fairy tales of eternal economic growth. How dare you? You are failing us, but the young people are starting to understand your betrayal. The eyes of all future generations are upon you. And if you choose to fail us, I say we will never forgive you.
So, thank you. Personally, it's an extraordinary blessing and a privilege to be able to know you and work with you. And thank you for sharing your time, and thanks for doing the work you're doing. And if we could just acknowledge these folks.
And how about we thank Alan and Amma, who are really doing the work that helps us do what we do.
So after we get our pictures taken, I'm going across the street to a bar. So,
Right there with you.
thanks, everybody.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.